Prepare to experience the strongest radio allowable by law. Secrets will be revealed. Myths dispelled. From the studio gym where excuses never apply, it's Superhuman Radio with your host, Carl Lenore.
Welcome back to Superhuman Radio. Today is October 29, 2019, for those of you listening to this show 100 years from now. And realizing that we were way ahead of the curve. And we are. Today is Tuesday, so we have the BluePrint Power Hour with my co-host, Coach Rob Regish, starting in just a second. Just want to remind people that Thrive Protein is the single best protein in the world. And right now you can save big time by using the coupon code COMPARE. It definitely won't keep you from getting a sore throat, but it will build muscle. Go to thrivprotein.com and compare your protein powder to Thrive. Check it out. And without further delay, let's get Rob's music queued up here.
Calling all BluePrint Army. Fall in line. It's time for the BluePrint Power Hour with Coach Rob Regish on the Superhuman Radio Network.
Hey, Rob, how you doing?
Well, I am decidedly under the weather. However, I'm making a fast rebound, so I'm here. That's all I can say.
Everybody is. Everybody I know is. I don't understand it. Sometimes I wonder if, like in my case, I caught a virus on this cruise ship. And listen, those of you who are contemplating going on a cruise, let me help you now. I'll save you tens of thousands of dollars over your lifetime. Every time you get the urge to go on a cruise, go to a local hospital and lick the floor. Go home, be sick for a week or two, and you can feel like you were on a cruise, but you didn't have to spend thousands of dollars to actually do it.
I would second that recommendation.
Cruises are for people who are fat and lazy and gluttonous, and I mean, you want to start drinking at 9 a.m. in the morning and eat every 2 hours. I got to tell you, I think the hardest working part of a cruise has to be the toilets in the rooms. I'm telling you. I mean, these people are big and fat, and they eat constantly, and they must crap 4 or 5 times a day. Have to.
Yeah, I would agree. Wholeheartedly.
So now, Coach, I'm taking off. I've been off for a week since I've been home from the cruise because I'm sick. Will you take off? Do you take off when you're sick?
Well, I will now. Let me just say, whatever hit me yesterday snuck up on me and hit me hard and fast. As a matter of fact, the only little bit of a warning I got was I noticed I was sweating a lot more on warm-ups. I did my trap bar deadlift. I got those done, but then I was hit with a sudden wave of I would say like a cold sweat.
Mm-hmm.
And then I just became progressively weaker. Fortunately, I was smart enough to cut it short. Came back here, laid down in bed, and honest to God, that was 15 hours ago, and I only got up about an hour ago. So I do have my appetite back. I will say yesterday, all I had, it was a banner day for fat loss. I had two Thrive shakes and heavy cream and 3 hard-boiled eggs. That was all I could get in me.
Yeah.
And that was tough keeping down.
Yeah, I lost weight, too. I got leaner as a result of being sick.
Yeah.
My appetite has come back the past few days.
Yep.
And I'm definitely eating, but I'm trying to, I mean, like today for breakfast, I had a half pound of liverwurst and water, and that was it.
Health is a gift. Health is a gift, and sickness will make you appreciate it.
Mike Grady says, hey, Rob, long time no talk. Anyway, since we last spoke, I'm down to 213 pounds from 280. That's great. And I'm really happy with my progress. I lost a hell of a lot of strength, though, until I hit 220. It was at that point that I added Synthogen, and bam, my strength losses halted. Even better, I've started gaining some of the strength back, and even as I dropped another 7 pounds. My problem is this. I ran out of Synthogen, and it's out of stock. I was even ready to import it from Predator Nutrition, which is in the UK, but they're out of stock too. How much longer is this going to last?
Yeah. Well, look, here's the situation. I know it is frustrating to people, me included, because I'm one Rhabdo episode away, probably from my last, and I'm looking at my last bottle, watching it dwindle away. Okay, here it is. Long story short, word from the lab is that it's going to be another 4 to 6 weeks, and labs are notorious for bad ETAs. I would tell you realistically, I would put it being, back in stock around the end of the year. Now, I'm going to make some suggestions to get you through, and they're good suggestions, but I want to tell you how we got here so that you can understand how and why these sellouts occur. Mass truly does everything that they can to accurately forecast inventory, and they've been doing it for 25 years. This product, though, is exceptionally difficult to keep in stock for a few reasons, and they're up against several things that are out of their control. Things like Raponticum, peak strength Raponticum, is only harvested once a year, and that's in August. If you harvest it at any other time, the amount of the actives in the plant is something less than optimal. So that's when the major production run of it is taken in from the fields. After harvest, an enormous amount of raw herb is imported here into the U.S., where it takes time to make its way through customs. And anybody that's ever had something stuck in customs knows it can be anywhere from a couple of weeks to a couple of months, which in a worst case scenario would bring us to late October. The lab now needs to turn those many metric tons of Raponticum of raw herb into an extract, which can take another 4 to 6 weeks, depending on how many machines are available, et cetera, et cetera. Those extract batches are then sent out for third-party lab analysis and certification. Assuming those pass, it takes an additional 2 to 3 weeks, okay? If a batch fails to live up to the 95% standard, most are 98. 95 is the least that he will accept. But if it fails, it happens, but it isn't often, the process basically has to start all over again, okay? Once that third-party lab analysis is done and certified, each batch of Synthogen is stamped with an individual lot number. So those of you holding bottles right now, if you turn it upside down, you'll see it. And so that lot number appears on the bottom of every bottle. Along the way, guys, stuff happens. Like a year or two ago, the lab didn't have our trademark black and white capsules that it's always come in. We were already 4 to 6 weeks behind. People were screaming for it. John says, "What do you want to do?" I said, "Run it with all white caps," which is the only other cap that they had available. I don't want to even get into the fiasco and the firestorm that caused. I mean, people literally were thinking they were getting counterfeit Synthogen, bootleg Synthogen. It was ugly. We're never going to do that again. I'd rather wait. At the end of the day, right, it's usually not until late December, January, the following year that Synthogen is back in stock. Finally, and this is probably the big one that's wiped us out the last couple times, we have no way of forecasting people who buy a lot of it. And what typically we can if we know that they're recurring customers. The problem is we had a customer just recently. He plays semi-professional baseball. He's a pitcher. He ordered a bottle. He found out real fast he can throw on a day's less rest every week. And he came back and he ordered caseloads, not one caseload, multiple caseloads of it. So when caseloads are flying out the door, it makes it really, really difficult, right, to keep it in stock and to stay on top of things. There's also the issue of waiting on nature, et cetera, et cetera. For a lot of now, Mass does everything they can to say, "Hey guys, we're getting low on stock. We got this issue. It's getting short." For a lot of companies, that's BS. All that is marketing. It's legit when Mass does it because they did it just before this last sellout, and they only do it when it's the truth. That's the way you have to roll with legitimate products. Trust me, I would love to think about this. I would love to be selling tons of it month in and month out without any pause, right? All year long. But the reality is that's not always how it works. At least not with legitimate products that are done right and they deliver real results for you customers and me, by the way, I'm a customer. So as I get more information, I will pass it along here. I appreciate everyone's patience. I really do. And rest assured, we are doing everything we can on our end. At the end of the day, guys, it's a lot like a fine wine, right? It does take some time. Just know that we are doing everything we can to fast track it.
Hey, Coach, the document I have only had the first question in it from Mike Grady.
Oh God, I'll have to send you. I'm sorry. I guess I sent you the wrong
I'm thinking we'll just go ahead and run the commercial early, and you could resend me the right one during the commercial break, and then we'll come back and because otherwise I could just go home and you can read the questions and then answer them as well.
I don't think they'd like it that much.
Okay, all right. And we have a good discussion at the end of today's show too. So stick around. We'll be right back with more of the Blueprint Power Hour.
Whether your goal is to build muscle or burn fat, you'll find everything you need at Redcon One. Need help getting a good night's sleep? Try Fade Out, or the most popular pre-workout supplement on the market today, Total War. Sign up for their new Transformation Challenge and win $10,000. Or shop for apparel that people at the gym will know that you are serious about your training. Need a testosterone booster that works? Check out Broomstick. Whatever you need, you'll find the best quality supplements on the market at Redcon One. Go to redcon1.com. That's REDCON1.com, or go to superhumanradio.net and click the Redcon One banner ad today. You've heard me talk about the chill pill on the show and how effective it is in helping people who suffer from social anxiety, or sometimes when you just want to take the edge off to a long, stressful day. Well, listen to this story from Dylan Goutreau.
Definitely takes anxiety with, which I have a long history of. Having started out at 2 milligrams a day of Xanax. That was at 8 years old. And so I stopped using Benzos 3 years ago. Extremely difficult. Yeah, so I spent about 3 years trying to find anything and everything I could that would be healthy for me to help with anxiety. Because I'm talking, full out panic attack. The chill pill was the first thing that I found that actually, in the middle of a panic attack, I can take, and it definitely subsides.
Go to drseeds.com. That's DRSEEDS.com. Use coupon code SHR and save 20% off your first bottle of the chill pill. Check it out. I promise this is one supplement that delivers. You already know the benefits of red light therapy. Now you have to find the strongest, best one out there at the best price, right? That's where Scott Chevery found himself. He had to create Mito Red Light so you can get the strongest, best red light therapy unit in the world at the absolute best price. And the Superhuman Nation gets an additional discount. Go to MitoRedlight.com and use code SHR to get the lowest price anywhere, plus free shipping inside the USA and deeply discounted shipping worldwide. Go to MitoRedlight.com and use code SHR today. That's MitoRedlight.com. Do you use protein powder? Then you'll want to hear this. Thrive Protein is the single best protein blend in the world, built around what Mother Nature put into mother's milk. Thrive Protein is the first human-appropriate protein blend. There's just too much in Thrive to list in this commercial. That's why I'm challenging you to compare your current protein to Thrive. Get your current protein and go to thrivprotein.com and see how your protein's label stacks up to Thrive. For a limited time, get 3 pounds of Thrive for $59.95, including shipping inside the USA. That's thrivprotein.com and code COMPARE. Get ready to experience protein envy. Are you looking for a better way to absorb the nutrients you know you need? Do what I do and start your day with Lipospheric supplements from Live On Labs. Unlike pills and powders, Live On's patented liposomal encapsulation technology transports nutrients like vitamin C, vitamin B, glutathione, acetyl L-carnitine, and alpha-lipoic acid to where they need to be, your cells. Visit try.liveonlabs.com/Carl to learn why I take these supplements every day to help me perform in the gym and in life. That's try.liveonlabs.com/Carl. livonlabs.com/Carl.
You're listening to the Superhuman Channel. We're ripped and we're ready.
Welcome back to the Blueprint Power Hour. So now I have all my questions. I can fulfill my duty as the host of the show. The next one comes from Enzio Panetti. He says, I'm a big fan of the Blueprint Power Hour, and I seldom miss a show. What I want to know about is keeping inflammation down. My family has a history of inflammatory disease, so this one is really important to me. What can I do to prevent this from happening?
He is absolutely right about keeping inflammation in check, right? That's important, I think, for all of us. Now, it's also important, though, to point out that some inflammation is natural and healthy.
And needed, necessary.
And needed. And if it can be controlled, like with arachidonic acid, it could be beneficial for some individuals.
But arachidonic acid increases inflammation, right?
Right. But that was my point about sometimes it's natural and healthy.
Yeah.
And can be used to your advantage. But all too often, too much inflammation is not. And I do think as strength athletes, we tend to forget that we live, a pretty pro-inflammatory type lifestyle. I mean, if you think about it, and that's important to acknowledge because inflammation, and this is a big statement, but it's the truth. Inflammation is either the underlying cause or it exacerbates almost every medical condition you can think of, right? Heart disease, high blood pressure, metabolic syndrome, right? Syndrome X, arthritis, tendinitis, bursitis, all of the itises, any of them. The question becomes then, how do you keep it in check? And so I sat down and I thought long and hard about this. And there are a ton of nutrients that I'm going to get to that I can give you. But first, I want to talk about training because I think what we do as strength athletes really is unique versus any other sport. And if you think about it, in what other sport are you intentionally doing damage to the inside of your body? And it just doesn't happen. So let's talk about training first. The Bulgarians, in fact, consider training a form of irritation to the body. And I mean, if you think about it logically, if you're working out with weights or resistance training or, some form of resistance training, you are breaking down muscle. You are stressing tendons and ligaments and bursa and fascia and all of those underlying tissues. Do you think your insides are going to be a little inflamed? Of course they will. So I would tell you the first and most important thing would be to do is stop overstressing your system by learning to balance rest with training would be number one. The problem is we don't see the cuts on the inside of our body. We don't see the damage like you can see under an electron microscope if you do muscle biopsies. You feel a little bit of it, with your residual delayed onset muscle soreness, DOMS, but you really don't see it. I tend to think if we saw it, we'd take it a little more seriously. So having as many rest days as training days, I think would be number one. And sure, you can argue, because I cited the Bulgarians, you can argue that in some cases they train multiple times per day, 6 days a week. But on the other hand, if you were a real student of Leo Costa's manuals and his works and Bulgarian burst training and Big Beyond Belief, you also knew that they always practiced recovery techniques subsequent to, and in some cases even prior to, those training sessions.
Well, and also they rested more than they trained. So when they would go into the gym for those multiple times a day, they didn't spend an hour and a half in the gym trashing themselves. They went in, they did a warm-up set, they did a max PR set, and then they went back to their room and they laid down and they rested.
I was absolutely going to say, when you look at it on a daily or weekly basis, you can say, yeah, they were training frequently. But if you look at it on an hour-to-hour basis, to your point, they were resting a lot longer.
Yeah, absolutely. And eating like animals.
You like animals. So, and some of those suggestions like massage, okay, that might not be practical. Taking naps, that might not be practical. But, presumably everyone in the audience showers. And as long as you're in there, you might as well try it. Hot and cold contrast showers
Mm-hmm.
Are a way of incorporating recovery techniques into what you're doing, and they're surprisingly effective. You don't need to be using them for more than a week or so to see the benefits that they have. So I would tell you to do that, and that wouldn't be the only thing. Leo's books still available?
Yes, they are. He's
Okay.
got a couple. He's got that burst training book, and then he's got the Big Beyond Belief, and then he's got one other, I believe, that he wrote later on.
Yep. And you know what? I would buy all of them. I'll never forget the education I got reading those books. But anyway, it'll speak to, balancing training with rest and recovery. Second on my list, of course, would be anti-inflammatory nutraceuticals. And the list is a long one. Probably
I know two of them that are on there.
in terms of
two of your favorites.
Well, in terms of cost effectiveness, baby aspirin, or even better, salicylic acid, which is where baby aspirin was derived from, is way up on the list. I can recall vividly reading Dr. Hatfield's book, Strength, a Scientific Approach, where he made the statement, and it's true, if aspirin was discovered 100 years ago and all that it did, it'd be a prescription drug. Fortunately, it's not. So,
I've even read that you couldn't get it approved today because of its side effects.
Probably.
Yeah.
So that would be high on my list. So would, of course, fish or fish oil.
Mm-hmm.
To your credit, Carl, insofar as dosing goes, I would be using higher doses every second or third day. Most people take 1 to 3 grams of fish oil a day. Most people also don't get much out of fish oil. There's a reason for that. I don't think they're using enough of it.
Yeah, and also eat fish. It's the best way to get your fish oil. You'll never ever get fish burps from fish or eating fish, but you will get them from fish oil. Think about it.
You get a lot of top shelf protein and creatine too. So fish oil would definitely be there. When I talk about higher dosing every second or third day, I'm talking 6 to 10 grams. That's what I consider high dosing. You can do that with less krill oil, or do the same with much smaller capsules, which are important to some people. Those tiny red capsules, especially for women, capsule size is a big deal, and the smaller the better. Curcumin, of course, I think would be the number one in terms of herbs on that list. Between 1 and 2 grams a day for most formulas. I have seen formulas with enhanced absorption down to about the 400 milligram a day mark, showing acceptable blood levels of it. But otherwise 1 to 2 grams. And make sure you're getting it either with piperine. Sabinsa's trademark material is, I forget the name of it.
C3. Oh, what, the biperine or the
right, bioperine. C3 is their
that's their standardized curcumin.
Yep. And to be fair, it's the one used in most of the studies.
Yeah.
Cissus quadrangularis is yet another. You've heard me talk about that a lot. It takes about a week or 2 to kick in, and it has a surprisingly effective success rate for many. I would say that over the years, 9 out of 10 people that I've recommended that to, they've come back and said, yeah, you know what? It works, and it works well. The sleeper in here, though, is something you just don't hear enough of. Boswellia serrata, aka boswellic acids, is a very overlooked anti-inflammatory herb. And here's the weird part. I don't know why it's so overlooked, because it brings with it almost immediate relief. Let me put it this way. If I were to do a glucosamine chondroitin type product, Boswellia would be first on that ingredient list. Now, we also, when it comes to anti-inflammatory stuff, there's research showing kratom, some of the actives, have not just an analgesic effect, but an anti-inflammatory effect. It is not as addictive as heroin. It is not an opioid, and it is not any of the other nonsense that you're hearing parroted by the FDA and the DEA now in an attempt to get it banned. And you should be aware that every day they are trying to, they're going to continue to do it, guys, until they get it done, unless we and the American Kratom Association, by far the most well-organized organization in the business, can keep it legal. And they've been doing a pretty damn good job of it. So please support their efforts. Next up on my list would be antioxidants. And now oxidation, while technically it differs from inflammation, it is in and of itself a major problem. And it is not just a accelerated aging problem. It's not just a cosmetic problem, although those are two side effects from oxidation run amok. To better understand that, I always go back to the example of cholesterol, right? You've heard high cholesterol is bad. You've heard LDL cholesterol is bad. The Framingham Heart Study left no doubt. High cholesterol wasn't the culprit. The culprit was oxidized cholesterol. So, when looking at antioxidants, I think it really pays to get into, what the top shelf ones are. And those would be revisiting curcumin, EGCG, epigallocatechin gallate from green tea extract, short courses of Buckminster fullerene, which, to your credit, Carl, I think this show broke the news on that one. And of course, then there are the more common antioxidants, vitamin C and E. But when we talk about E, not only are we looking for the natural D form of tocopherol, not the synthetic DL form. It's real easy to miss on the label. But we're talking about, tocotrienols as well. I think you said you were using
there's four tocopherols and 4 tocotrienols, and you should take a full spectrum E, but there's a lot of evidence that people take too much vitamin E. E is really good in smaller quantities, very high quantities of vitamin E. In fact, Adele Musa just blogged about it recently. In just 30 days, high doses of vitamin E compromised kidney and liver function in just 30 days in individuals. So E you could get plenty of E if you eat the right foods.
Do you recall what high doses was?
No, but I think that it's pretty accepted that people who are taking more than 400 IUs a day are starting to go into the high end.
Okay.
And so, and this was just the D-tocopherol version. This wasn't the balanced tocopherols and tocotrienols. So we don't know what contribution that has to the discussion. But vitamin E has always been thought to be a very powerful and potent fat-soluble vitamin. And I don't think you need a lot of it. The problem is people have their favorite antioxidant. So they take 6 grams of this one and 3 grams of that one. And antioxidants all have different jobs.
Yep.
Just like there's different drill bits to drill different holes. Yep. If all you have is a 5/8 inch drill bit, then all the holes you drill are going to be 5/8 inch size, and that's not going to work for every job that you do.
Right.
And so you people need to start to think about antioxidants as a spectrum and getting a fair amount of all of them,
Yep. So, you've got C, you've got E, you've got pycnogenol, and of course, alpha lipoic acid. The best form of that would be the R isomer, not the S, which importantly, it has been shown to recycle vitamin C. I can't recall if it was shown to do the same for E, but certainly for C. And it is both fat and water soluble. Astaxanthin is a really, really sharp carotenoid that has an ever-growing body of research around it. It's not going to make you bigger or stronger. It's not going to make you more muscular or leaner. But its antioxidant activity is quite a bit more potent than CEE and the like. The most important antioxidant, though, that I would be getting, if I were to get one, would be N-acetylcysteine, or cysteine residues from high-quality whey, the likes of which are found in Thrive, okay? Because what those do is they are precursors to building your body's most prolific endogenous antioxidant, that being glutathione. And so reliable is glutathione as a biomarker for aging, that's what the medical community uses. So, think about that. N-acetylcysteine in any reasonable dose it's just a very easy, simple way, I think, to stay on top of your body's most important antioxidant. So that's a short list of what keeps inflammation in check. And honorable mention goes to DMSO, if you can hack smelling like garlic. Now, there were 2 products, though, on the market that were no odor DMSO. One of them was yours, Carl, right? Was Primal D. And the other one was put out by Pat Arnold. I can't for the life of me remember what he had in it. But, listen, I can't find an odorless one. If anybody out there listening can, I'd really appreciate you.
What we used in Primal D is odorless. I'm not going to explain why that is. I'm not going to tell other people how to fix the problem, but it is odorless.
I mean,
and even in fairly large doses. I mean, there are big. I mean, if you poured it on your skin, like out of the bottle, you'd start to smell. Yeah, there's no doubt about it. But spraying 5 or 6 pumps of it on you doesn't make you smell like DMSO.
Yeah, it's like, the other night I got home from jiu-jitsu. I got out of the shower. I put a DMSO roll onto it. I went to bed, and I woke up with the most god-awful taste in my mouth.
Yeah.
Oh, God, it was like this metallic garlic. God, terrible thing.
And there's a reason why it smells like garlic, or some people say onions, and that's because it's that sulforaphane family of odors that are actually supposed to be good for you. Jeff Clifton had a question.
Yep.
He says, can you speak in regards to curcumin or turmeric acting as a monoamine oxidase inhibitor? MAOI.
I'll be honest and say I don't know a lot about that. I don't recall reading much about it. The one thing that I do recall reading was that it could tie up the cytochrome P450 enzyme in the liver, but that's a different
issue. Everything does that.
Yeah.
Everything does that.
It'll make your kratom work better. I'll say that.
I think monoamine oxidase inhibitors, I'm not really clear on what they do, but I kind of feel like they have something to do with mood altering drugs.
You often hear about them spoken about in the context of antidepressants.
Yeah. Okay. So there you go. And so I know things like what's the yellow stuff they put in the rice?
MSG.
No, the plant. It's very expensive. It's it'll come to me in a second. But anyway, there are certain natural MAOI inhibitors out there that people have to be aware of if they're on those types of drugs that either make them work harder or blunt their effects at all.
What's really weird though, for all the warnings I've heard about that, I've never heard from a single person that said, "Oh my God, I had this horrible adverse reaction because I was using an MAOI inhibitor," or MAO or whatever.
MAOI, yeah.
And I'm not saying it doesn't happen, but God, for all the warnings they put out, you would think you'd hear a lot more horror stories about people having issues with that. It's not like they're overrunning emergency rooms or anything.
So it says, obviously, MAOI inhibitors are both monoamine oxidase inhibitor enzyme inhibitors, as well as monoamine oxidase A and monoamine oxidase B. They are best known as powerful antidepressants as well as effective therapeutic agents for pain disorders and social phobias, which tells me that they have an anxiolytic effect. I have a funny feeling that saffron, Mike Bear, thank you. I couldn't think of saffron is a known MAOI inhibitor. It also has been shown in high doses to act like an SSRI and actually alter mood. And so it's interesting that saffron has that yellow color and that curcumin and turmeric have that yellowish orange color. I was going to point that out because both of them seem to be contraindicated of use if you are on MAOI inhibitors. Zoloft apparently was an MAOI inhibitor. And we know that Zoloft underperformed against exercise in treating major depressive disorder. So just connecting some dots there. I don't know enough about these. And the reason I don't know enough about these is because this is a class of drugs that I not only have no use for, but I'm suspect of causing lots of harm in our population. These psychotic / mood altering drugs like SSRIs and MAOIs. These drugs are horrible. I'm just waiting for someone to tie them back to all the mass shootings. I've said this before, and it's worth saying again, but the lack of any discussion about the role of antidepressants in mass shootings to me is very suspicious. It would be it makes itself available for discussion. Hey, we're talking about this, guns and fatherless homes, but yet not a person is saying, how many of these people were on antidepressants? And then when they find out that almost all of them were, then the next logical question would be, what role are antidepressants playing in the types of behavior that lead to not only suicide, which we know of already, but mass shootings? Shootings. And wait, hold on one second. Hold on. Yeah. And the fact that there is not one major media outlet even going, this is tangentially interesting in this discussion, we should probably at least take a look at it, tells me that the reason that Capitol Hill wants to overzealously go after guns as the problem, when all of the statistics and all of the facts show that that's not the problem, right down to the fact that only 800 people a year die from rifles like AR-15s. More than 4,000 people a year die from knife stabbing wounds. More than AR-15s. No one wants to talk about removing your steak knife. The fact that I almost have started to think, I think the pharmaceutical industry is funding the anti-gun rhetoric to divert people away from the obvious question, and that is, what role are these mind-altering drugs playing in mass murders? It's a logical question. No one is talking about. It's amazing to me.
You made a very interesting statement last week. You said in every instance, or almost every instance, these people have been on psychiatric drugs. I went back and I looked. You are absolutely 100% correct.
The guy in the Texas Bell Tower, the book tower at the Texas College, where he had a high-powered military rifle, basically, bolt-action rifle that's considered a deer rifle today, and he started just picking off people down in the campus. Right. He had just been put on a drug for schizophrenia or bipolar disorder. They didn't call it bipolar back then. They called it manic depression or something. He had just been put on a mind-altering drug like just a week before that, and then he goes out and starts killing people. And, the fact that nobody's talking about this means something's there. Something's there. And I really believe that Big Pharma's going, we can just throw more money into politicians' pockets to keep them talking about guns so that nobody asks any questions about these drugs. We're going to do better off, because I suspect that once somebody starts asking questions about these drugs and some intelligent, unbiased, well-trusted group starts looking into it and going, wow, there is a correlation. 90% of the mass murderers were on new drugs. Their drugs were just changed. They just put on these drugs.
Yeah.
And wow, we need to look at this. As soon as that happens, it's all going to fold for the pharmaceutical industry. It's all going to fold up.
The problem is they got HIPAA protecting them. You can't go into somebody's medical records.
But you can sometimes, right? You can sometimes when you get authorization, right? HIPAA requires authorization to see these documents. So family members could easily, or that have either power of attorney or assumed power of attorney because of their last kin or whatever, could say, yeah, we want to show those records. And now the cat's out of the bag.
It's a great question. Can your medical records be accessed as part of a criminal investigation to see if you were on mind-altering drugs? Because if you were, then mind-altering drugs, in my mind, have a lot more to do with this than guns.
Of course.
A lot more.
Of course.
It's, to me, that's common sense. But you're right. It's like, why is nobody talking about it? What they do is it gets to the Second Amendment issue, and then they have so successfully succeeded in dividing the country 50-50 down the middle, Democrat, Republican, Second Amendment, not Second Amendment. We're all at each other's throats, and meanwhile, these idiots are getting away with it.
They made it a sport. So Mike Bear says, FYI, Walmart is now selling collagen peptides. I wonder what brand they are. Are they Great Lakes? I buy Great Lakes because Great Lakes has the single best collagen hydrolysate, which is basically collagen peptides. They have the best in the world, and it's all. They also test it. They use non-GMO sourced raw materials, and they test for glyphosate. They don't brag about it. I know that they do. The owner has been doing this for decades, before collagen protein became popular. And I talked to the director of marketing one time, really nice guy. And I said, you guys ought to promote this fact that you test for glyphosate. He says, we just don't want to bring any attention to it, but we do it. So all of their collagen protein is free of glyphosate. Because remember, glyphosate is a synthetic form of glycine, so it accumulates wherever glycine should accumulate. Collagen protein is 40% glycine.
Yeah.
So if you're using a collagen protein that is not organic, from organically sourced material, and it does have glyphosate in there, it's going to become part of the collagen protein.
Yep. Yeah, that's good to know. That's a great tip. Thank you for passing that along.
Yeah. Let me see where we are in time, because we took an early first break. I think we're going to continue on here. Yes, we are. We're going to continue on just a minute, a little bit longer, and go back to another question here. Get back on track. George Corrigan says, I have a real issue with staying awake during the day, and it's not because of lack of sleep. What are some good stimulants I can use to stay awake during work hours? I've been using ephedrine and caffeine and more of it, but it's not working anymore. Suggestions. Look, dude, don't say it's not from lack of sleep. Just because you're laying still for 8 hours a night with your eyes closed, you're not sleeping. The first thing you need to do is buy a sleep tracking device like the Sleep On Ring or even an Aura Ring, and also download an app called Sleep Cycle, which will record whether or not you're snoring at night. And if you know you're snoring, you don't need more caffeine. You need to correct your sleep problem, because you're not sleeping just because you lay down at 9 o'clock and get up at 6 a.m. in the morning, and what happens in the middle of the night you don't remember. Because that's BS. You're getting enough sleep. If you get enough sleep, you don't need these things. You just don't.
Yeah, let me answer it this way, George, because I can really empathize with you. I was in the exact same situation that you were. Basically, it was using ephedrine caffeine in the mornings. By 12 noon, I was shot for the rest of the day. Using stimulants to stay awake is never a good idea. And it's particularly troubling, though, if you're getting adequate sleep. Besides the point, as you're finding out now, the same way I did, you keep using them a lot, they stop working. Okay, so here's what I would do. To your point, Carl, first, I would get some sort of sleep tracking device. Frankly, I'd see a doctor. If you're falling asleep during the day, daytime sleepiness is not normal. Okay. Getting a sleep study done, that's quite possibly another thing to do. Like you said, to your point, people who usually think they're sleeping adequately, oftentimes they're not. You won't really know, right? And unless it's accurately tracked, and a proper sleep study is sometimes necessary. You might gain some insight, like you said. Just a Fitbit, I would imagine, would tell you a lot more than what you got.
The best thing is to buy a sleep-on ring. They're only like $90, and it checks your blood oxygen. It checks your hypoxia levels if you are holding your breath at night. You're snoring and you're taking longer and longer pauses in between your snores. It measures hypoxia. It measures heart rate. So it shows you that if your heart isn't dipping like it's supposed to when you're resting because you're snoring, you go if you're sleeping and the sleep cycle will record every time you snore. Last night I snored for a minute and a half at 1 a.m. in the morning. I know that because it recorded it. And I want to know that because the more I snore, the worse my sleep is.
And given how important sleep is, $90 is a bargain. A bargain.
The sleep-on ring is a sleep study in your finger. It's a little big. It's the size of an almond. It fits on the inside of the ring, and so all the real stuff is back here. So you have your hand closed while you're sleeping or whatever. Right. It's checking blood oxygen. It's telling you if your blood oxygen is dropping. You'll use that along with the Sleep Cycle app. And in one night, you'll go, oh, my God, like I'm suffocating at night. Or I'm waking up 40 times a night, like because I'm snoring.
Right. And so let me tell you what the end game in my situation was. My testosterone levels, they were totally in the cellar. I get on a decent dose of HRT, and I have very clean, consistent energy throughout the day now. And even nights when I didn't sleep a lot, frankly, I do pretty good. In the past, I was a wreck. I can distinctly recall looking at my grandfather and saying, there's no way I'm going to make it another, 20 years or 30 years to retirement. But let's assume you are getting adequate sleep, and you're still nodding off during the day. It may be that you have a condition called narcolepsy. And I know a lot of people have heard of this, including me, which is up to and including a sudden loss of consciousness during the day. You can fall asleep for anywhere from a few minutes to half an hour. And if that isn't scary enough, in the process of researching this question further, there's a condition called cataplexy, which can cause a number of physical changes, anywhere from slurred speech to lose all strength in your muscles, and that includes your bladder muscles. Cataplexy is uncontrollable and is usually triggered by intense emotions, interestingly enough, including positive ones like laughter or excitement. It can also sometimes be triggered by fear, surprise, or anger, anything that apparently is rather sudden. When you laugh, when these people laugh, unexpectedly, their head just boom drops uncontrollably. And although they may be conscious, they can't raise their head. Think about how much scary that might be, or your knees buckle. Some people with narcolepsy only experience 1 or 2 episodes of cataplexy a year. Other people, scarily enough, have numerous episodes daily. Think about that. Think about how terrifying that must be. Just getting behind the wheel, right, to run errands or to go to and from work. Most physicians, interestingly enough, tell you that there's not a real cure for narcolepsy. And I don't know, that may be true. It may be one of those things where not enough research money flows in and nobody's looking at it. But it would seem to me that there are ways to at least treat symptoms, and you needn't be hopped up on stimulants all day just to address it. Modafinil, aka Provigil,
Stimulants have, from what I remember, stimulants have the opposite effect on narcoleptics.
They may. That's good. That's a good
Because
point.
what they give narcoleptics is GHB to keep them awake.
Wow.
And stimulants make them sleepy. So if he was not truly narcoleptic, I think his abuse of caffeine and ephedrine and things like that would actually make him more tired. So if he's taking them and getting exhausted afterwards, then he may be narcoleptic, and he's just using the wrong meds.
The people that I know, and there aren't a lot of them, it's only 2 or 3 that deal with this issue. The way they deal with it is modafinil, which is prescribed. It's a prescription drug for alertness and awareness. It was originally created with U.S. military funding, given its fighter pilots on transatlantic and trans-Pacific hops. Right? They don't respond real well to traditional stimulants. I don't know if you guys are familiar with what an F-16 cockpit is or how big it is, but you take a guy that's just my size, like 225, you put him in there, it is almost MRI-like. Now, you take an even bigger guy, put him in there, and then give him, Ritalin or whatever to keep him awake on an overseas flight. My God, that would be, to me, torture. I'd freak out. Definitely freak out. Modafinil is only available with your doctor's prescription. It is a Schedule 4 drug. Having said that, I'm sure Customs, or I would hope they have better things to do, right, than go after people who want to stay alert during the day and not be hopped up on stimulants. At least I would hope so. It is not a stimulant, at least in the traditional sense. Instead, you just have this feeling of being wide awake. And if the focus is quite noticeable as well. There are a lot of students, frankly, that use modafinil.
A lot of pilots, a lot of everybody. It's very popular in Silicon Valley for these guys who are working in the tech area as well.
Right. And so, I guess the good news is that modafinil is a controlled substance. Adrafinil, its prodrug, is not. Okay, so it's the precursor to modafinil. It takes longer to kick in, around 45 minutes in most cases, and you need to take a lot more of it. Your standard modafinil dose, I think, is 100 to 200 milligrams. You're going to need 600 to 900 milligrams, maybe even a little more of adrafinil to get a similar effect. And again, it takes about 45 minutes to kick in. On the other downside to adrafinil versus modafinil seems to be it has much greater liver toxicity. And although it's not something you want to be using frequently, I would still, to be on the safe side, be using a healthy dose of N-acetylcysteine that we discussed earlier, or TUDCA, TUDCA, for liver protection, just to be on the safe side. So if you're going that route, I would start with adrafinil at maybe 600 milligrams, go up 300 milligrams. Most pills are 300 milligrams from what I've seen. And if that's still not cutting it, see your doctor about modafinil. It's not like you're walking into the guy and saying, hey, give me a prescription for those amphetamines or Ritalin or, whatever. You're much more likely to get a subscription for modafinil, although don't be surprised if he or she recommends what we just did, which was, hey, let's get a sleep study done first, to see what's really going on.
Yeah, something's going on. I want to answer this question before we take our break. Excuse me. This is from Nathan Haney. He goes by Nathan Joseph on his personal page. He's an amazing boxer. He's saying that he has acute shoulder problem, and he can't rest because he's preparing for the most important fight of his life. But the pointy bone at the top of my shoulder is sore to the touch. Is this a tendon issue? It could be soft tissue for sure. And here's what you're talking about. So the acromion bone, that bone that goes across the top of your shoulder, has a joint in it that allows a little flexibility in the tip called the AC joint. And that could be the source of your pain. It's also presses down against the bursa that starts off and encapsulates the deltoid, the medial deltoid muscle as well. I have a funny feeling that of BPC 157 and thymosin beta 4 side injected, possibly even mechano growth factor, pegylated MGF, would cure this inside of a few days to a week tops.
You hear it all the time.
But that's most likely soft tissue, because that AC joint is designed. If my finger is the acromion, right here at this knuckle, there is a gap of bone that is filled in with soft tissue, so that the tip of that can move and have a little bit of flexibility to it. But when you overextend your shoulder, the bone doesn't just snap. And so something you're doing repetitively, probably throwing the way you throw a punch, maybe the way you're throwing a punch from low to up, with that arm. Did he say it was his left arm? He didn't say. Is causing a repetitive motion injury, overuse injury, like a bursitis or a tendonitis, or in that joint there, just because of the way you explained it, that it's the top of the bone. And so I absolutely thymosin beta 4, BPC 157, and mechano growth factors. I would do a half a milligram of BPC 157. I would do 1 milligram of thymosin beta 4, and I would probably do 250 micrograms of mechano growth factor right into that area twice a day, just for 3 days. That's all you needed, probably 3 days. And you just have to pull the skin up, have somebody do it for you. If they have to pull the skin up, you don't have to stick it in the AC joint. You have to get it localized so that as it drains into the body, it hits that area first before it goes on and searches for receptors elsewhere. But I would absolutely, and I predict that if you did that 3 days in a row, twice a day, like I'm saying, within a week, it'll be gone, and it'll be gone for good.
To me, you hear that all the time. So even when BPC 157 is the only thing they're taking. Yeah, I know it sounds like people are overselling the stuff, but I mean, those reports are common.
Even Dr. Seeds' oral stuff. I mean, I got something this morning on my Facebook page from Joe Mazza. I think it was from Joe Mazza. Hold on. I don't want to misquote somebody's name and not give them credit for something, but let's see who it was. Mark Mazzio. He said, "Thank you, Carl Lenore, for hosting Dr. Seeds' BPC 157 on your show. 1 bottle in, and my nagging hip and knee pain is almost completely gone. At 59, no pain is a good thing." So that's the one peptide that you can deliver orally, because it's actually made in your gut naturally, so the gut knows what to do with it. But the MGF, mechano growth factor, and the thymosin beta 4, you can't take those orally. So you'd have to inject those in the site. But again, you'd probably just need to do it for 3 or 4 days, and not have to do it anymore, much more than that, because you'd probably feel better by then. And if you did want to, you could keep running, just back out the MGF, and you could keep running and the thymosin beta 4, and just keep running the BPC for until it's all gone. That's all.
Is BPC banned by any sporting organization?
No, of course not. No.
I was going to say, how could they? It's naturally occurring in the body.
Well, yeah, and how do you find it? It's not something that's how do you find it? Like, what do you got? They remember the tests for growth hormone don't even work.
Yeah, I'm just saying, thinking he's a high-level boxer, obviously, so he might have to consider some of those things.
Well, of course, and I'm just telling you what would cure the problem. And then obviously, I would also take a little bit of vitamin C every day, along with some collagen protein, a good quality collagen protein, like something from Great Lakes. Let's do this. Let's take a quick commercial break. When we come back, we'll wrap up the show. We have a couple more questions, and then we had a couple things we wanted to talk about. So stay tuned. We'll be right back. Let me get the music rolling here. I'm really behind on my job today. Here we go.
Men and women, you've heard about hormone optimization. Do you feel like it's something you want to look into? RenewLifeRx.com is the place to start. Their doctors can help you with the solutions. RenewLifeRx.com has a simple process for lab work, consultation, and taking a deep dive into where your hormone levels can be improved. Superhuman Radio listeners get 30% off your initial lab work and consultation. Go to RenewLifeRx.com to schedule your no-obligation phone consultation today. Feel younger, get in better shape, and be more productive at RenewLifeRx.com.
Quest Nutrition makes bars, cookies, chips, and pizzas out of complete dairy-based proteins. Our products minimize net carbs and sugar without sacrificing taste. Each delicious chocolate-flavored chip, cookie chunk, and crunchy crumble is custom-made to maintain Quest macros. It's time to enjoy foods that work for you, not against you. It's time to enjoy your Quest.
Are you still on the fence about Body Protection Complex BPC Oral from drseeds.com? Listen to Maggie Kuhn, one of the owners of the C-Bus Lifting Company gym in Columbus, Ohio.
I had been having some nagging tendon issues that weren't injuries, just things that were annoying. You know, I'm 58 years old, so just older tendon kind of issues. For a powerlifter, you know, we really don't stop training when we have just nagging issues. We just kind of keep pushing through them. I started the BPC. What I noticed was I was doing some heavy tricep stuff that would have killed me before when I had an elbow problem, and I was able to do those with literally no pain at all.
Go to drseeds.com, drseeds.com. Use coupon code SHR and save 20% off your bottle of BPC Body Protection Complex today.
New Mass Pro Synthogen X2 just upped its own legendary game. To distance itself even further from the rest of the pack, Synthogen X2 now has double the key active ingredients. If you've ever wondered what steroid-like recovery feels like, Synthogen X2 delivers. See why others compare it favorably to powerful bodybuilding drugs at Synthogen.com. Mass Pro Synthogen. When you train with it, you'll gain with it.
Hey, this is Carl. For 14 years, you've heard me talk about Can-C eye drops, and they being the reason that I do not need reading glasses at now 61 years old. But I regularly get emails and messages from people who've been using Can-C and having some amazing results. Recently, I got an email from a fellow named Chad, who, because he was on dexamethasone eye drops for over 6 months, developed a cataract. Can-C eye drops actually reduced my cataract to the point where even my doctor has a hard time finding it. I will never stop using Can-C eye drops twice a day. I've been using them since 2008, he says. And you should be too. There is no better way to keep your eyes healthy and seeing clearly than Can-C eye drops. Go to wisechoicemedicine.com today and get on board, and we will both be looking into the future with very clear vision.
This is the Superhuman Channel. Evolution just got kicked up a notch.
Welcome back. So I put a tag up here. We have a listener named Carl Lenore. And he said to check out peptidesciences.com and use the code SHR for 10% off. If you do need any BPC, thymosin alpha-1, thymosin beta-4, MGF, IGF, use the pegylated version of MGF. It lasts longer. It makes a difference. All right, so let's see. Next question. I'm sorry. Do we have, let me see how many more questions we have, because we had a topic we wanted to cover as well. So let me just see something here.
I think we're on 4.
What's that?
I think we did the first 3 questions, so we should.
Enzio, let's see here. George Corrigan, we just did. John Varlow, what would you do for weak shoulders? Using Wendler's 531 and doing lots of pressing upright rows and other direct shoulder work. What really works, and why are they so difficult for me to grow?
Yeah, for most people, shoulders are not the most difficult body part to grow, nor are they usually the weakest. Shoulders actually grow pretty well on most guys. And there's an old saying, and it's very true, and that's you can't hide weak shoulders. But normally the issue is not in getting the muscles to hypertrophy, but rather people with a narrow, let's call it bone structure. So it's a bit like having wide hips, right? You can't change your bone structure, but We're going to look at an example here of a guy who had less than optimal genetics for shoulders. And he was a guy by the name of Larry Scott. Larry Scott, when he started training in 1956, his narrow shoulders were a particular weak spot, but he went out and he found a solution to that. And his first and most important solution was a guy by the name of Vince Gironda, right? And then subsequently, Scott became best known for his arm development. Now, but when it comes to Scott, though, there are a couple things I want you to focus on. Actually, three. The first of which is, okay, he may have had a narrow bone structure for shoulders, but number two, he went out and he found an extremely powerful ally in Vince Gironda. And if you don't know who he is, we'll get to it, but suffice it to say, he's one of history's greatest trainers, and that is no understatement. And then finally, he became one of the best built men in history. Okay. So when he found himself with narrow shoulders, which was point number one, notice what he did not do. He did not resign himself to a life of bodybuilding obscurity just because his shoulder girdle was narrow. Instead, he trained under the supervision of the greatest bodybuilding coach of all time by many people's count, with Gironda. So he knew he had a problem, and then he got help. Notice where his help didn't come from. Didn't come from a pill, a powder, a potion, a needle, none of that stuff, okay? He got some of the best help in the business from one of the best brains in the business. Second, Scott didn't let a bad genetic hand define who he was, because to this day, Larry Scott is known for his arm development, okay? He had some of the best, most aesthetically pleasing arms, and biggest, especially for his body weight, that were ever seen. I want to say at a body weight of about 210 pounds, he had a legitimate 20-inch arm. Might have even been bigger. And so in that respect, nobody was talking about his shoulders. Instead, they all wanted to build arms like him. As a result of those issues, number one and two, he became one of the best built men in history. In fact, during his heyday, it was something known as Larry Fever. Okay. He became the very first Mr. Olympia in 1965, and then defended his title and won again the following year, receiving a then record purse of $1,000. If you can imagine that. I would tell you a few things then, based upon, what you've shared with me. First, I would ditch the standing overhead press for the handstand push-up. And I would train that using 1/4 inch mats, starting with 8 to 10 of them stacked up on top of each other. As soon as you can do 7 reps, pull one mat out, which extends the range of motion, right? And it makes it a little more difficult, at which point the reps will drop again before building them back up and going through the whole same rigmarole. In short order, you should be able to do full handstand push-ups, which are an incredible feat of strength, okay? And you should continue to add weight to those in the form of a weight vest or, whatever other apparatus is necessary. You can also make them more difficult by performing them on handles, which extend the range of motion, right? Because the head has to go down even farther. To preserve a higher volume of sets and reps, though, after that strength work, what I like to do is add some of the mats back and then do partial handstand presses after that. Meaning, you go from doing full range 1 or 2 reps with a heavy weight to half handstand push-ups for much higher reps, maybe 2 or 3 sets of 10 to 12. The pump that you get in your shoulders should be absolutely brutal. You can't even imagine it. Something, I never got from any amount of standing or seated barbell or dumbbell shoulder press work. For whatever reason, that's just how it is. And for whatever reason, even though I'm bone on bone in this elbow, I can do handstand shoulder presses without pain. I can't anymore anyway, do standing barbell presses. As for the upright rows, I would drop those like a bad habit, because they are. It is a terrible movement, in my opinion, and it puts the shoulders at major risk for injury, especially due to the fact that most guys get carried away with the amount of weight, and now they're slinging it, and there's more momentum in the movement than muscle contraction. But even if that wasn't the case, I still do not like the movement. I've seen a lot more bad things happen than good things. If you are able to do at least one, let's say, barbell press, I would make it the Bradford press. And this is a version of the standing overhead barbell lift, which is you're using a very moderate weight, but essentially you start from a point below the chin. You press the barbell up just until it clears the top of the head, and then you bring it down behind the neck. And then you reverse that to a point now where you're under the chin again. That is considered one full rep. If you can perform 2 or 3 sets of 6 such reps, then I would ask you, tell me what you notice. And what I noticed, what I always noticed, which I didn't get out of any other movement, including the handstand shoulder press, was an intense contraction and pump in every head of the shoulders, those being the front, the medial, and the back, right, the rear. As far as what movements to finish with, I never liked the side dumbbell lateral raise. I just think it's another movement where guys get carried away with the weight, and even if they don't, it places your joint in a very unfavorable position, right? And due to the arc of the movement and how far away the dumbbell gets from the fulcrum, again, I've seen more bad things happen than goods. Instead, I would do a couple of sets of dumbbell front raises. And personally, I do not use an overhand grip. I use a pronated grip, and I perform it for high reps. High reps being defined as anywhere from 12 to 20. Let's see, what else can I say? Oh, a lot of people ask me about, my rear delts are weak. Shouldn't I be doing bent over dumbbell, side lateral? No, the answer is no. And the reason is, there's a reason you have poor delts, rear delts. The same reason that most guys have a substandard back. They fail to perform as many pulling movements as they do pushing movements. So as an example, when I go to work, let's say chest and back, I am supersetting seated cable rows with close grip push-ups with my feet up on the wall. I am doing set for set and rep for rep equal for both of those. Okay, so it's usually anywhere between 3 and 5 sets of between 7 and 10 repetitions. Occasionally I'll play with lowering the rest intervals in there, but look, think about it like this. Your rear delts, are they going to grow better by using light dumbbells and leaning over and doing bent over side dumbbell raises, or are they going to grow more if you're using a very substantial weight on a seated cable row or any other deserving rowing movement? Of course, the one that we're using more weight, it's going to work much better. Your back is also going to grow along with it. So there is one other movement, though, that I would tell you is worthwhile for the rear delts if you're still having trouble, and that would be sitting facing into a pec deck and then moving the shoulders to the rear. It is probably the only valid use for the pec deck in my mind, but it does seem to do the trick for a lot of guys. So it is also worth remembering this. Shoulders are kind of like knees. You need to be very careful with the amount of work and overload that you're throwing at them. Your shoulders don't or shouldn't need a lot of extra work, right? Because if you think about it, if you're doing justice to your pushing and pulling movements, like I just described, your delts are getting plenty of work. They really are. And I'll admit, I'm blessed there. It's probably one of my better muscle groups. But for all the work I've seen guys put it into little fly movements, I would tell them to stop that altogether. Stop doing the upright rows and pour yourself into your pressing and pulling movements. You're going to build big shoulders.
This next question, I had the luxury of being able to read it while you were talking. Let me just drink some water. And do a little research. I'm sorry. This has been hanging on. Adam Duval says, I have a question about deaths in bodybuilding and powerlifting and strength sports in general. Why do so many people avoid the real reason? Steroids? Am I to believe so many died before 50 due to natural causes? Why is it always swept under the rug? Because it's not steroids. It's not. Paul Anderson died at 62. And if you want to be fair to the discussion, you can do a cursory review of research on PubMed about the rate of death in smaller versus big people. There's a lot of research out there. And bigger people, I'm sorry to tell you this, it goes for me too, but small people live longer than big people. Big people die sooner. They even looked at just basketball players, since they're not like strength athletes. And sure enough, they die sooner than counterparts who are smaller. And so it's not the steroids. Now, is that to say Rich Piana, his steroid use didn't contribute, along with his cocaine use and everything else, to his so enlarged heart that it just couldn't beat anymore? Yeah, probably. But so did cocaine. And not every bodybuilder or powerlifter is out there doing cocaine. So, it's really a misdiagnosis to say that powerlifters and bodybuilders die young exclusively because of steroid use. Because while we have the losses in the category, the high-level losses, Rich Piana, Dallas, what was his last name? I can't think of it. I'm so sorry. What is it?
McCarver.
Yeah, McCarver. Thank you. And people before them. We also have a much larger, vastly larger, much greater size of bodybuilders who use drugs that didn't die.
Yeah.
So, we look at these, we say take these, let's say, 26 guys, because I did a show with Dr. What's his name? George Tuliatos about this. We look at these 16 guys that died very young, that were bodybuilders, but we forget that behind them are 6,000 guys that didn't die young, who used drugs that were bodybuilders.
Yeah.
So it's really a disingenuous question. Big people do die faster. Big people do die younger. Small people live longer. There was one study I looked at once that showed, like, for every 4 inches you're taller than this, your longevity will go down by that. And so, but really, bodybuilders and powerlifters are not dying in greater degree of numbers than the general population by far. And if anything, there's a lot more that are living that haven't died yet, and they're in their 60s and older. So
the devil is always in the details, okay? And so I want you to consider the following. So on one hand, you could say that methyl 1 test, a steroid, is incredibly toxic, potentially dangerous, and continuous, uninterrupted, high-dose use would almost assuredly result in an early death of someone. On the other hand, you could say that testosterone, also a steroid, is relatively benign, not at all dangerous, and in many cases benefits not just mortality, but also morbidity or the quality of people's lives.
Right.
Both statements are truthful. Both are accurate. Both are steroids. One will likely add to your demise, the other subtract from it. The problem is this. The public isn't concerned with details. Neither is the press. They like simple stories that are easily understood. And the media, for its part, is not concerned with such details. Okay,
They're not concerned with facts. They're concerned what is counterintuitive because that gets people to tune in.
Easy to understand and grasp headlines and concepts are their entire reason for being. And along the way, for whatever reason, in my mind, they followed sport governing bodies and then government. They decided that all steroids were bad guys, even the one that belongs in your body, testosterone, in both males and females. That's a bad guy. It's really a classic case of the baby being thrown out with the bathwater. Now, I want to give you one other example because it's very pertinent. In the mid-90s, there was an up-and-coming powerlifter under this tutelage of Louis Simmons called Matt DeMel. He was setting the world on fire. So at a body weight of almost 385 pounds, he squatted over 1,000 using Louis' methods and had a likewise monster total. And then at the tender age of 33, he dropped dead. And at the time, not much was said about it, okay? But of course, the speculation swirled that it was copious amounts of anabolic steroids, his extreme body weight he had been carrying, or some combination of those two that were responsible. And I can admit this, even I, up until just recently, assumed that was the case, okay? We were all wrong. Matt DeMel died after his stripper girlfriend loaded a syringe up with an 8-ball of coke and 2 grams of heroin and shot it into his arm.
She was trying to kill him?
God only knows what was going on.
I mean, she had to be trying to kill him. She had to be, yeah.
His heart literally exploded, and he was found face down, bleeding right out of his mouth. Heart literally exploded. I don't know much about illegal drugs, but grams of even supplements, never mind powerful illegal drugs, are scary to me. Look, I'm not telling you that staying on tons of gear for decades at a time with known family history of heart disease, high blood pressure, bad lipids like Dallas McCarver and others had, I'm not telling you that's not going to do you some harm, okay? But far more dangerous in bodybuilding today, if you want to talk about bodybuilding drugs, is insulin, which can kill you in minutes if you shoot too much or you don't get enough carbs or both. Diuretics, which can kill you in minutes via, an excretion of too much of potassium and other things that kind of keep your heart beating, okay? Or painkillers, which an overdose of the opioid-based painkillers can shut down your breathing. It happens every day in this country. And and here's the scary part, especially about the opioids. The vast majority of people dying are not bodybuilders. They are everyday people like you and me. They got hooked, many of them. I just talked to a woman 2 nights ago about this. She's still reeling from it. They got hooked on opioid painkillers by doctors who will never be held accountable because of their big pharma cohorts in this manslaughter that they've caused, are both untouchable. They used their ungodly amounts of money and their influence on Capitol Hill to insulate them from almost any real litigation or consequences, no matter what happens to you from taking their drugs. So yes, Adam, I imagine some bodybuilders and other strength athletes may die from using known to be toxic steroids after decades of gross abuse. But before you jump even to that conclusion, and I challenge anybody listening to do this, I want you to visit any emergency room in the country. Take your pick. Sit there for a day, a week, or a year.
See how many bodybuilders come in that need
for a decade if you want, and count how many steroid overdose victims come in just clinging to life. There aren't any. If you don't believe me, try it. You'll see. And in the unlikely event you see one or two, that is a drop in the bucket to the millions who are dying, millions, from alcohol, tobacco, and painkillers.
And that's why it's so disingenuous and it's such nonsense how we and our government are selective about what things we will tolerate causing mass death. Right? Like if we said no, anything that causes this kind of death, we have to do away with. That's the right thing to do for the human population. Yeah. Then tobacco would be gone, alcohol would be restricted, probably not gone, but restricted. Its use would be restricted. And there's other high risk behaviors that people partake in that probably would be restricted. Yeah. But we don't care as long as the government is making tax dollars on tobacco products, tax dollars on, I said something the other day. I feel bad for police officers today, and I'll tell you why. Because they take their orders from the justice system, and the justice system has become a business. It's become a business. And like a business, you want to increase the number of customers you have.
Yeah.
The problem with that is that the justice system does this in ways where police officers are forced to go out and do things that the public knows are scurrilous. But the cop has no choice because he's got his boss's foot in his ass saying, you got a quota. You got to arrest a certain number of people. I don't care if there's nobody out there doing crime. Find somebody. And so police officers aren't allowed to police the way they should any longer because justice has become a business. And I was telling this to Elisa just yesterday. I said, let me put it to you in a very, very, very easy way to think about it. If you got paid $100 every time you spanked your kids, there'd be a lot of child abuse in America.
Yeah.
A lot. People would be beating their kids 4 or 5 times. That's $500 a day. I don't have to go to work. Think about that. This is true. So when you take a police officer and you say you have a quota, you have to arrest this many people, then you're predicting that crime is going to happen when maybe it's not. And you're putting police in a position where they have to go stop a guy that they probably wouldn't have stopped, but they're thinking, shit, I got a quota. I got my boss breathing down my neck. I'm going to go see this guy. I'm going to see what this guy's up to. Maybe I'll find something. Maybe I won't. But I got to because that's my job now. Police officers don't uphold the law. They are representatives now of a business model that is designed to increase the number of people that get pulled into the net so that cities who are bankrupt can generate money off of the backs of their citizens without having to go and raise taxes. It's scandalous. And this is the problem. The day that law enforcement became a business, it's the day that everything fell apart.
Yeah.
I mean, think about that. If you got paid $100 every time you spanked your kid, like there was a law that said, we want better parenting, and so we want parents to be more disciplinary with their kids. Every time you spank your kid, you get $100. Man, there'd be a lot of kids catching beatings for no reason at all. Mom comes in and says, I wish I could have that new hat. Dad thinks, man, I wish I could buy it for her. Hey, Joey, did you clean your room? And you go and give the kid a beating? You got $100. I mean, think about it. I know it's far-fetched. I know people are going to go, oh, Carl, this is the most ridiculous. But it really is what the judicial system has become. It really is.
And look what Aiden's got up here. Opioids now the number one killer of Americans under 40.
Yeah. I just dropped it. I had it up there the whole time.
My wife, my just last thing. My wife's son's an EMT. He actually tells us he's really a garbage man because almost every call he goes to is picking up junkies that have overdosed.
Yeah, it's sad. Let's get this last question in. Jerry Byers says, I don't train with a training partner, and my high school gym is pretty limited in what it has. A few power racks, a few benches, mostly mismatched dumbbells. How am I supposed to train and gain in a place like this?
I would tell you that what you perceive as limited resources are actually the best thing that could have ever happened to you. Because I'll just give you one quick example. When I was 15, 16, I was brought to a parish rectory. They had a dozen universal machines, the latest and greatest, right? And I trained on those for, 2-3 years before I got to college. When I got to college, the weight room that we had consisted of, there was one power rack, 2 leg presses, 3 bench presses, an incline press, and a whole slew of mismatched dumbbells laying all over the ground. And I was dirt poor. I had no money. What I did have, though, I was on the meal plan, so I could go to the dining hall 3 times a day. And so as a consequence of limited resources, my workouts consisted of squatting, pressing, deadlifting, rows, presses, and we had to improvise. You wanted to do something like a T-bar row, you jammed one end of the barbell in the corner of the gym, you loaded the other one up with weight, you straddled the bar, you grabbed it, and you rode it. And oh, by the way, I made more and this is no exaggeration, I made more progress in the span of 6 months in that dirt hole gym, if that's what you want to call it, with no machines and that, than I made in 3 years of training on universal machines. And at one point, this is even worse than universal. They said, we're getting new machines. I said, well, what kind? And they said, the latest pneumatic resistance. And so what this is, it's like that little pump on the side of your screen door.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That keeps it from closing too fast.
Yeah.
That's exactly what these things were. And so it was even worse.
And they would say, but they offer bidirectional resistance because when you push, the air would go psst,
right.
And then you'd pull. Psst.
Yeah.
Oh, so, bidirectional resistance. Pneumatic training. What a joke.
Long story short, the more advanced we think we become, at least with respect to resistance training devices, the further backwards we go. For my money, there have only been a couple things that have come along since barbells and dumbbells that add to their effect. Bands, I can definitely say bands. Perhaps chains, and not much else. If you want a great workout, go buy yourself a weight vest and a book on body weight training.
Buy yourself a weight vest and go for a walk. Go for a hike.
Right. And if you want to see what 20 pounds of fat's going to do to you, throw that 20-pound weight vest on, walk upstairs. See what it's like carrying that around. And now to your point that you made before about heavier people dying, earlier than lighter ones.
Yeah.
It's funny because I had this discussion with my wife the other day. I said, I don't know about this, but I rather doubt I'm going to live well into my 90s like my grandfathers, for the simple reason that they were very slight men.
Yeah.
One weighed no more than 130 pounds in his life, and the other one, I think, was 165.
Although I think we are at a point now where we understand they accumulate more senescent faster, because the more fuel you put through the body, the greater the accumulation of byproducts that are left behind that are metabolic waste.
Yeah.
And we can do things about that. We understand that intermittent fasting and upregulating autophagy. We understand about using drugs like rapamycin 1 day every 2 weeks. We understand that getting good sleep. Heavier people snore. So who knows the contribution of obstructive sleep apnea to the big guys that trained and were so big and strong and they snore. So there's a lot of things that we can do now to help tilt the scale. Regular blood donation. I mean, all these things help big guys live longer. My father lived into his 80s. He probably could have lived another 10 years, but he really didn't take care of himself at the end. He stayed up all night, all the time, and he ate the wrong foods. And I know why he stayed up all night all the time, because he was miserable. He was sad. He was aging. He felt like he didn't have his youth anymore. He was probably depressed to a certain degree. So.
Yeah, and I don't know about you, but I do not want to live to 95 and spend 5 years in my bed, where I can't go to the bathroom by myself. I would rather check out in the gym or my sleep 15 years earlier.
He probably didn't want to take care of himself because he didn't want to live longer. Aiden Ray says maybe look into BFR, blood flow restriction training, as an option. If not, tons of weights available. We will have the premier BFR company as a sponsor probably this week. That'll go live on our website. They are the safest, most effective blood flow restriction training system because it's built around the actual Katsu science. And so I haven't been trained. I haven't trained in a week, but before I went on the cruise, I was using them, and I was like, I'm going to say something right now to you. BFR is better than steroids. If you want to build bigger muscles, if all you care about is building bigger muscles, if you want bigger biceps, bigger triceps, bigger quads, bigger calves, bigger forearms, bigger shoulders, that's all you care about, and you're not using BFR, you're wasting your time, because nothing else that you're going to do will be as effective. And I'm saying that with all honesty. I looked at this product and I thought, I held on to it for months and didn't even try it. I thought, this is nonsense, and I'm not going to wear these stupid things into the gym and look like a dork. And then one day, Kirkland Morletti, who does some work for me, said he's been using them and he thinks that they're great. And I thought, okay, so let me try it. And within 2 days, I was like, oh my God, this could actually be more effective than anabolic steroids in building muscle.
His physique certainly speaks for itself.
Yeah, he's in great shape. But stay tuned, because we're going to have a discount code and we're going to have an amazing offer. And if you've been wanting to take the plunge into BFR, we're going to give you a reason to do it. Great. I think that's it. I think we've covered everything we need to cover, brother.
Yep. Great. Well, thank you for having me. I'm sorry I was a little under the weather, but I thought it was a good show.
Oh, yeah, and you'll feel better. We'll talk to you later. And we'll see everybody tomorrow. Tomorrow we're doing a show about breastfeeding you're not going to want to miss, no matter whether you're a man or a woman. Seriously. It's going to be a really good show. So we'll talk to everybody then. Thanks for listening today.
Okay.